in a police role is more. So a lot of centurions also served as like a police.
But don't police use violence?
Yes, no, they do. What I'm saying is that necessarily doesn't.
Right, hold on one second. Because the debate that we're having is whether Christians can use violence. You have just conceded that the early church fathers recognized legionnaires as Christians acting like police officers, and police officers use violence to uphold the law, which Rome, in Romans 13, is sanctioned by Paul, that says that they have the power of the sword. I mean, John of Damascus addressed this question when the Muslims in the 7th century said to him, you Christians, what?
He's on my reading list.
Yeah, so John of Damascus said, when the Muslims said to him, you say that you love your enemies, and yet here you are drawing the sword. And John of Damascus said, yes, if you insult us and harm us, we don't fight. But if you harm our brother, we draw the sword and we fight you to the death. Somewhat along those lines, right? The point is that the action to violence that flows out of the fact that we are a community and we should love one another. You cannot claim to love the brother who you can see if when you see him in need, when he needs a blanket or when he needs food, you say to him, God bless, may you be warm and may you be well with fed. You've got to show your faith by your works. So when your brother needs protection from a disgusting, vile jihadi, love demands that you fight, if necessary, that jihadi to protect your brother.
Rejoicing in truth, not wrongdoing.
Sorry?
Corinthians 13, love is patient, kind,
yes.
Not envious, boastful, conceited. It rejoices in truth, not wrongdoing. So if someone's attacking you,
and it also says love defends.
But I feel like a stronger testament would be to not use violence, to try and find. I mean, if you look at the history of Mennonites and Anabaptists, the immense amount of persecution as a group that we suffered is insane. But the fact that I think that we never raised the sword in response, that we went to our dads as martyrs, I think is a stronger testament.
But that's a prophetic argument. But I'm arguing from the general principle of love. What you're doing, and I agree, it's a valid argument, right? Like, I am not saying it's stupid. Right?
I don't think you are, don't worry.
Right? But because you're making a prophetic argument, not a moral obligation, right? Your argument is prophetic. It's about witness. It's about testimony. It's about testifying to the importance of peace. It's about testifying to the being a witness to the gospel of peace, to the kingdom of peace.
Yes.
Right? And I agree. Right? It's great. But that's not what flows out of the general principle of love. The general principle of love in a fallen world requires that when Christians are being persecuted, that we cannot do nothing.
I mean, I would do something, I just wouldn't use violence.
Right, but the point is, love, let me ask you this question again, because I think we kind of settled this debate right in the first 5 minutes. If someone right now, started physically attacking your wife, would you physically if someone physically started attacking your wife, are you just going to stand there and let them beat her up?
I would put myself in between them.
Right, and then what? What you do when you stand in between them?
I would attempt to put myself on them. And
right, but the moment you do that, you've used violence. The moment you grab, but the moment you grab someone in the context of a fight, you've used an act of violence. Granted, it's very minimal. It's not as much violence as I would use, because I'd be jabbing the guy in the eye with the umbrella, right? I'd be punching him in the face, right? I'd be kicking him in the butt. Like up the ghoulies, I'd be grabbing his crotch and I'd try to crush it.
Have your muscles
I'd stick my thumb in his eye and I'd try and push it right in. But the point is, we might be on different ends of the spectrum, but we've both used violence.
I think there is some, we have a thing called two kingdoms theology, so it's basically the idea that obviously God has ordained the government to wield the sword, which is not done in vain. I just don't believe that Christians should participate in that violence. But for instance, if there was a war going on between two armies, and actually you can see this in Justin Martyr writes about this, is I would pray for the army that doesn't want to kill Christians to win, despite that I wouldn't personally go and take up a sword and fight alongside
John the Baptist, what did he say about the soldiers, the ones that were soldiers? Inexact. He was telling them how to conduct.
But his argument works with that. So, but the thing is, you're making an argument that you've inherited from Augustine. The idea of the two cities, the city of God and the city of the world, right? That duality, obviously it is apostolic, because church government emerged in a Roman Empire that had its own government.
Yeah.
Right? Also, you appeal to the church fathers, but Augustine is a church father, Ambrose is a church father, Thomas Aquinas is a church father, so on and so forth, and they believe in the idea of a just war, right? Which is a Roman concept.
Yeah.
They've Christianized a Roman concept.
Obviously, there are people, I'm not denying that no one believed in just war, but I think there is a consensus among the 2nd and 3rd century.
But my point is, I think you're being selective in just stopping with the early church fathers, rather than looking at including the later church fathers. And I think that's arbitrary. I think you're doing it because it suits your argument to do it.
I mean, it's because
you're consistent.
I agree with them.
Exactly, it's arbitrary. You're choosing the church fathers you agree with.
Yes.
Now, but the point is, the moment you accept the authority of the church fathers, then we just keep going with the church fathers, and the church fathers disagree with the idea of pacifism.
I use them in the sense that I don't think church fathers can ever be wrong. For instance, I'm not a Roman Catholic, and actually also is not their position.
I'm not a Roman Catholic either.
I'm not saying you are. I've gathered that actually. So I thought you were.
Yeah.
Is that I point to it, or those early fathers, as an example. This is not a novel position. It does have. There are clearly Christians close to the apostolic era that believed it.
Yep.
And a lot of people dismiss the Christian pacifist position as just being this novel liberal thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a liberal at all. I'm very conservative.
No, I know Mennonites. I know. Right, but the point is, right? You made a statement. You made a statement about the idea that Christians shouldn't participate in politics, and I would say that is not biblical. Let me lay out my case for you.
Go ahead.
Your mind will go to, I'm sure, the passage in Matthew where it says, "Render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render unto God what belongs to God." But what do the Psalms say about the earth and everything in it?
It all belongs to Christ.
Right.
It's all, every knee shall bow.
Yes. So when Jesus said, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God," everyone heard, well, everything belongs to God, nothing belongs to Caesar. Caesar belongs to God. God establishes government.
Romans 13.
Paul himself states that God establishes government.
Yes.
And Paul himself tried to convert rulers. Remember when he was in front of King Agrippa?
Yeah, no,
Well, we should convert
Right.
everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So when King Agrippa becomes a Christian, there's nothing. Remember, Paul said, like, "I want you to be like me in every way apart from these chains." He also wrote in his letters, if you were entered as a slave, continue as a slave. If you were a free man, continue as a free man. If you were single, continue in the state that you were in. Right? So if you were a king and you became a Christian, following Paul's teaching, what do you remain?
Well, I mean, I would infer from that, for instance, that if there was a prostitute, they shouldn't continue
Yeah.
being a prostitute. So in a similar way, if you're a king, I guess you could be a peaceful king in theory, or there was a way to restructure it. But I would say that in a lot of cases, if you're a king and you kind of rely on a violent army underneath you, then yes, you would have to step down.
But God didn't establish prostitution. God did establish government.
That's yes.
Right,
Okay,
so your argument is flawed because the reason why prostitution is something that should be stopped is God never established it. It's not part of the teleological nature of the universe. It isn't something that points towards God. Government points towards God, which means that it is supposed to be ordered according to Christian teachings and principles, which can only be done if rulers are themselves converted and still rule.
The way I see it, like Romans 13, which is sort of the passage that all the debate gets caught up in, is Romans 13 is referring to governments that are appointed to rule over a sinful society, and the church is a separate thing, that we're not to be part of that we're not to participate in them or wield the sword within them. It's referring to a separate order.
Yeah.
It's not referring to an order that has to be Christianized.
Right. Well, unfortunately, though, the early church fathers, when they were objecting, for instance, like the early church fathers said, let he who's become a Christian not wear the purple, right? The reason why they did that is because for you to be a legate in the Roman Empire, you had to praise pagan gods. You had to give incense to Caesar. And that was the objection of the early church fathers to the Christianization of the legates.
I've seen this argument before, and it's actually a bit blurrier, where there are cases where the objection appears explicitly to holding a magisterial office, and I believe that's with Tertullian. There's a book by
Tertullian wasn't a church father.
I mean, he's an early Christian in the sense.
He's an early Christian. He's an ecclesiastical writer, but we can't use him in the group of church fathers because he's not an early church father. Same with Origen, he is not an early church father. So you can't use him as part of your argument.
But, I mean,
they're just ecclesiastical writers.
Just to extend the parameters, maybe church father is not the best thing to say. Again, you know more than this than I do. Do you think, though, that like when those people write, it does show that that was a view held by a lot of Christians at the time in the apostolic age?
Right, so then what we have to understand is, we've got to ask this. If it was the case that it was a deeply entrenched belief and teaching of the early church, that Christians and the Roman Empire are two separate things and one shouldn't penetrate the other, right? Why do we find after the Edict of Milan that wall just evaporates so quickly? So that in less than 100 years from the Edict of Milan and the Battle of Milvian Bridge, which Christians believe was inspired by a vision of the Christ, that we get Theodosius I and the Christianization of the Roman Empire, without any resistance at all from any church father. No church father argues against that interpenetration.
So I don't know enough about that event specifically to come back at you with it, so I will go home and look into it. So for now I concede to you.
Yeah.
But in some cases, again, referring to the other thing about wearing the purple is some of these that I've read into, the traditional presentation of it isn't quite accurate, and I would be surprised actually if I do read into this. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say that I'm wrong. Well, I'll email you and say I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I could very well be. I'm not saying I'm not.
It was also that these legates were commanded by the Caesars to persecute the Christian.
But it's that there are other things in that same period that do seem to explicitly say the objection is to just holding magisterial office and not the pagan element, like blank.
Yeah. I think that it's in the context that the legates, it's like the Roman centurions that rather died than carry out commands to execute Christians.
Yes.
Right? They were centurions. They were in the army. They were not anathematized. They were like John the Baptist when he said to the Romans, be happy with your pay and don't extract money from people. They were Christians inside the Roman legions, and the church fathers were not saying to these Roman legionnaires, you should leave the Roman legion.
This is actually a debate also in these early Christian writings, where some appear to believe that you can serve in the centurions in an auxiliary role, but you can't kill. While others believe you can't serve in it at all, which is more where I don't have a clear position either way on that one. But again, I don't think it's so clear cut as they're saying, like, oh yeah, you can go out into an army and fight and wield the sword and kill.
But if you are an auxiliary in an army, are you helping other people to kill?
In a police role is more. So a lot of centurions also served as like a police.
But don't police use violence?
Yes, no, they do. But what I'm saying is that necessarily doesn't.
Right, hold on one second. Because the debate that we're having is whether Christians can use violence. You have just conceded that the early church fathers recognized legionnaires as Christians acting like police officers, and police officers use violence to uphold the law, which Rome, in Romans 13, is sanctioned by Paul, that says that they have the power of the sword. So therefore, using your own early church fathers and scripture, some of them, not all of them, and scripture, we have developed another strong argument that Christians can use violence and can be involved in the state. So in other words, you claiming that Christians shouldn't be involved in the state is undone by your own argument.
Cornelius wasn't asked to resign his position when he got
we
the
don't
Holy
know.
Spirit and come in, did he? It's nowhere in Acts does it say, Cornelius, you're a Christian now, stop.
Yeah, there's no example of Cornelius abandoning his position.
We don't know what happened to Cornelius, but that's what I'm saying. The standard response to that would be we don't know what he did afterwards. But the general point I'm making is I do concede that some of them say, no, you can serve in the government or you can serve in an auxiliary role, but you still can't kill.
Right, but have we established that Christians can be involved in government and can use violence?
I mean, I can't say either way hardline.
Well, hold on one second. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim that early church fathers said that Roman centurions could only serve in an auxiliary role, like a police officer, but then say that they can't use violence, because that's exactly what a police officer does.
There were others, though, that disagreed that they could serve at all. That's
Right. And I'm saying that the reason why they disagreed is because of the way that people like Diocletian, Nero and others were using the centurions against the Christians, and the fact that the cult of the Caesar was an essential part of what it meant to be a legionnaire.
Can I recommend you a book on this topic. It's very scholarly, and it's actually I found it very helpful. And a lot of what I'm saying comes from this book. So
yeah,
we're gonna. It's a book called "The Early Christian Attitude to War" by a guy called C.J. Cadoux. It's spelled C-A-D-O-U-X.
Yeah.
He was a Quaker, obviously, but quite respected historian for early Christianity in the 1940s, 1950s.
Yeah.
And
when the Quakers were still Christian?
Yeah, at that point they were. They hadn't gone. He was. I looked into his background.
They hadn't been taken over by the New Age at that point.
Yeah, no. I've looked into this guy, and he was solid. But his scholarship is good, and he goes through that the main debate wasn't around whether or not you could kill. He thinks the broad consensus was you could never kill. But it was, can you still serve in government or the police without killing or using violence?
Yeah.
And that's the debate. And I'd say I don't know exactly where I stand on that.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't serve in government myself. I wouldn't serve in the police because I specifically wouldn't want
Whereas
to.
I think that what Christians should be doing and should be aiming at is establishing a new Christendom. The Christendom that we have lost, we should work towards building another one. And that means that we should take over government. We should take over all positions of power, influence and authority, and we should use government and law. Bent towards violence will die by the sword. It's just a natural reality.
I don't think it's me that's taking up the sword against them.
But the point is that I think C.S. Lewis called this moral cowardice.
I don't like the idea that it's moral cowardice.
C.S. Lewis called this moral cowardice. He's a modern church father.
All I have to say is, the Anabaptists, we produce more martyrs than most of the other sects did, and we're not unwilling to die. We're not scared.
I think the Catholics might argue with that argument.
About this instance from about 10, 15 years ago, when they had the government pass a bill, it goes to the House of Lords. I can't remember exactly how many bishops were in the House of Lords, and that bill didn't get passed because of one vote that the clergy using the clergy vote. So that one vote, it was so important to stopping that legislation getting passed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it can play a pivotal role in certain things that are going
to hold you back.
It's all right. Thank you, though. So my point is,
I will think about everything you said, by the way. I'm not like dismissing your thing.
Where's Bobby thing?
Okay,
we're going.
Oh, right. Well, I'll see you there.
We're actually moving in 2 weeks, and I don't think we'll be back at Speaker's Corner for a while.
We've got to go to a friend's child's baptism. We're a bit
right
on that, but we're
I wanted to give you a book, but the book that I had in mind, I will give to you when we meet at the Where's Welby thing.
Would you accept if I gave you the C.J. Cadoux?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's very scholarly.
Your books belong to me. My books belong to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking.
Anyway, I'll give you a book.
You're an intellectual giant.
Really,
and I'm
really
learning
lovely.
a lot every time.
Peace be with you, brother. Peace be with you, sister. And God bless you both.
Yeah, see you on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday, God willing. Yeah, God willing. Peace with you. Are you a Mennonite as well? Or are you just like the Mennonites? just hanging out with them. They're wonderful people. I really do think that you guys have something amazing to share in the Benedict option that the rest of the Christendom.
What I see as we're doing politically is we're just building another society, and I think it's better than the one we're in.
I agree.
Why bother with this one?
I agree. Anyway, we'll talk again.
Yeah, no problem.
God bless. Take care.